This episode of Brains on Games will talk about two dexterity games, one that's very old and one that's brand new. Welcome to Brains on Games. I'm Dr. Brian McDonald, and this episode we're going to talk about two games, a really old one and a brand new one. Both are dexterity games that involve flicking. We'll start by talking about one of my favorite games of all time, and we'll just get right into it because I am excited to talk about this one. And because this board is so big, I'm very crowded in this space, so I want to get through this video. This is a game called Crokinole. Now, I'm not going to hold the board up because it's gigantic and there's no box that comes along with my Crokinole board, at least. It just came in a giant cardboard box. So hopefully I'll find a picture of the board or a picture of some gameplay. I'll try and record some gameplay so that you'll be able to see the whole thing because it is a little bit tough in this very tight space. Crokinole is a game that plays with 2, 3, or 4 players. So generally we've only played it, and this is one of the games that we've played the most out of any of the games that I have on the shelf behind me or in my house. We've only ever played with 2 or 2 teams of 2. There are sort of variant rules for 3 players, but we've never really used those. It's a game that you can play in 15 or 20 minutes, and it's a game that works with kids of all ages. As long as they can understand that flicking motion, they can definitely figure out this game of Crokinole. Let's take a deeper look at my Crokinole board. There are tons of different boards for Crokinole. You can find sort of factory-made ones on Amazon or at Walmart, for example. Usually those ones are pressed wood with a sticker over the top of it and metal pins, which means that things don't slide super smoothly on those kinds of boards. Mayfair every year puts up a Kickstarter campaign where they sell boards that are higher in quality, and they do have the rubber-coated screws like my board does. This one comes from a local company, Basically Perfect, that is in town. They're in Ottawa, so I didn't have to have this giant thing shipped anywhere. You can get boards that are slightly smaller, but this is the tournament legal size, which is a little over 2 feet across in terms of the playing surface, and then there's a rail around the outside. That's why it will not fit on my table. You're only seeing a small slice of this giant circle on my camera here. Crokinole is a game that is light in terms of its complexity. It's very simple to learn. There's a little bit of strategy, but it's nothing too complicated to figure out. The way that you win a game of Crokinole is by being the first one to reach 100 points. And that means that you've got to flick these discs into these various circles on the board because they're worth a varying number of points. If you manage to shoot a disc into the center hole, then you're going to earn 20 points and the disc comes off the board. We always have a bucket beside the board where we put our 20-point chips if we manage to get some on any given round. If you manage to get your disc fully within the center circle, that's worth 15. The outer circle here is worth 10, and then the farthest one to the outside is worth 5. Of course, if you get one in the gutter on the outside of the board, that's not worth any points at all. Each player is going to take turns flicking their little discs. So you can get discs in different colors. I've got black ones and blue ones that are easy to tell apart, and they sort of match the color of the gutter of my board. And then you're flicking them like this. Now, I'm not going to be able to do that from way over here on this side. I'll push it forward like that. But on your turn, if your opponent has discs on the board, you have to touch one of their discs or else yours comes off. So it's a wasted shot. You've only got, I think, a dozen of these discs to shoot on any round. So if there is a disc on the board in your opponent's color, you have to touch it. Otherwise, you have to get your disc at least touching the inner circle. It doesn't have to be completely in, but it has to touch the inner circle. So there are often going to be wasted shots where you miss, or you bounce things off the pins, look at that, or you somehow manage to mess something up so that your disc has to come off. Now, if your opponent does have a disc somewhere on the board and you miss it, but you hit one of your own, then both of your discs come off and the opponent gets to keep theirs. So the strategy is in positioning your discs so that they're hard for your opponent to hit, maybe setting up some guards so that discs that are more valuable will stay on the board, or setting up easier targets so that your opponent will aim for them rather than your 15-point ones that are protected by the pins in the middle. As I mentioned earlier, there's all kinds of places where you can get these boards. We really like this one for two reasons. One is because it's real wood instead of a sticker, we can wax it, which keeps everything very slippery and lively. So when you flick a disc across this board, it really sails. I told my dad that I don't wax my car, but I do wax my Crokinole board. It has been a while since we waxed this one, so it's not super lively and bouncy, but you can see that the discs slide fairly easily across this thing. What are the mechanisms you're using in a game of Crokinole? Well, of course, it's a flicking game. So primarily that's what we're talking about, is just flicking. The skills that you're practicing are your motor skills, your visual motor skills. Fine motor dexterity is important in being able to accurately tap those discs and get them where you want them to go. You can't hit it too hard or it's going to shoot out the other side. If you hit it too easy, it's not going to go far enough. You do have to get used to an individual board. So I might be an expert on my board and then go to my friend's place where they haven't waxed it or is made of a different material and the discs are going to slide differently. It always takes me a game to kind of get used to the board again if I've been away from Crokinole for a while. But this is a game that we play pretty much more than any other, I think, that I have down here in my basement. There's a lot of physics in this game, of course, so a little bit of understanding of physics is helpful here, and certainly you can develop some understanding of friction and reflection and the cause and effect reactions of when one thing bumps into another and how they interact with one another. But that's certainly not the primary aspect of this game. This is a flicking game. Final thoughts about Crokinole. Well, you know already, I've talked about this game before. Daryl Andrews had it in his top 10 Canadian created games of all time. This is a game that I love. It's a game that we play more often than any other. And one of the reasons for that is, A, it's simple. Anybody can pick it up. It doesn't matter their age. Anyone can figure this one out. It's simple to explain. But also, this giant board does not fit on my shelf, so it stays out on the table. I move the Crokinole board in order to set up any other game. This one is always out, so it's always visible. I know sometimes my son or his friends will kind of just walk by and flick some of these discs just to see if they can get a shot in the center, even if they're not playing a full game. So it's always out, it's always accessible, it's always visible, so it's always sort of top of mind when you think of playing a game. The other thing about these kinds of dexterity games is these are the ones that generate huge emotional reactions from the players. More than most strategy games, I would say. A good shot, a fancy trick shot is going to generate that big reaction. Everybody cheers when that happens. You know, people are getting pats on the back if they make an awesome trick shot or if they predict the shot that they're going to make. There's lots of trash talk when you're playing a game like this. So it is a fun sort of interactive game, and it's simple enough. It doesn't require great concentration. Nobody's sitting thinking at length about their turns. You're just going back and forth taking shots with these discs, and it is super fun. Crokinole is the old flicking game that I wanted to show you. Like I said, one of my favorites, but what's the new one? There is a dexterity game that I have seen probably 100 times on Facebook. It's constantly popping up in my feed, and it always looked interesting, but I kind of scrolled past it because it's one of those, it's a game that's made in the States, and to get that, it's not all over the place in terms of the retailers who carry it, so to get that shipped to Canada would have been a major expense, so I sort of just scrolled past it until I got an email from a Canadian retailer who had their hands on some of these boards. What is this brand new game that keeps being advertised on Facebook? Well, I'm going to hold it up here. It's a game called, I don't know if you can see the label on the sides, a game called Biñho. Now, Biñho is, I'm holding up the whole board because it comes in just a white cardboard box that says Biñho on the front. I hope I'm saying the name right. I think it looks like Biñho to me, but it is a tall but more narrow board than the Crokinole board. You can see that there are pins and there are nets. This looks like a soccer field. Biñho is a two-player game, although you can play with two teams, so multiple players can play it, but you don't want to be waiting too long for your turn in this game, so I would say two players or two teams of two. You can play a game with kids of any age, and a game plays in 10 to 20 minutes, say, depending on how skilled the players are. It can go on a little bit longer if you're not getting the ball in the net. In the box of Biñho, at least this version that I picked up, you've got these elastic walls that you put around the outside. The board came with the supports for the walls attached already. I had to screw in these little pins. So it came with these little bags of pins, came with 2 balls, instructions, and of course it's a soccer game. So you've got yellow cards and red cards as well. One of the things that jumped out at me about this board right away, besides the fact that it's got like turf on the top, so it's like a soccer field, is if you flip over the board so that you can see the back, they've got little felt pads just so that you're not going to scratch up your table. I found that these were not quite big enough because on my table anyway, there's still some of these little indents were touching against the wood, so I put a big mouse pad underneath it so it wasn't an issue. And you've got these metal pieces. This is where you're attaching the pins, so everything is very solid once you're starting to play one of these games, which is really important because you're flicking things pretty hard against these pins. You want them to be in there pretty solid. So it's a kind of a modular game where you can take the sides off, you can take the nets off and replace them if something happens to them. You can take the pins in the middle out, which is really important as part of gameplay. In terms of complexity, Biñho is super light. There's not really, you don't even have the strategy like you do in Crokinole of setting up blockers and guards, because really there's one ball and there's pins. What you're trying to do in this game is be the first one to reach 7 points. You've got little pins that are score counters here that will keep track of your score, but you're trying to be the first to 7. What are the rules? Well, there's a rule against double touching. So if I touch the ball and then I flick it, that's going to give me a yellow card. If I touch the net with the top of the net with my finger while I'm taking a shot. So imagine if the ball's in here and I'm trying to clear it without touching my hand on the edge of the net, I don't want to get a red card for doing that. If you flick the ball over the side and it goes, and sometimes that happens, somebody took a really hard shot or the ball took a funny bounce and it went outside of the board, you get a yellow card for that as well, a red card if you do that from inside your own box. If you get a yellow card and then you get a second one, then it flips to red and everything resets. But if you get a red card, you have to take one of your pins out of the board and you flip the card to determine whether you get to choose or your opponent gets to choose which of the guards gets taken away. And they are easy, like I showed you earlier. You've got those metal supports inside the board. It's easy to take these out and put them back in again. They just screw in and unscrew. We are talking about a very simple flicking mechanism, and often it just went back and forth and back and forth. When we first started playing the game, my son thought that it was completely random because it's hard to angle shots off this net because it is a flexible elastic, but that also allows you to do some trick shots. It's just hard to be accurate about it. We did find, at least I found, I'm undefeated in this game so far, that with practice, you do get better and you can plan your shots a little bit better. So it is not totally random, and it does involve those visual motor skills. It's a flicking mechanism and it's dependent pretty much solely on visual motor skills. There's no math. There's not really a lot of planning ahead. It's a pure visual motor game, but that makes it super simple to pick up, easy to teach anyone, and easy and quick to play. Final thoughts about Biñho. Now, this is a game that I thought I would really like it. My kids were both soccer players when they were in high school. The older guy still plays it every so often, and we really love soccer at our house. So I figured I would enjoy this one because it combines a soccer theme with the flicking games that I already like. And we must have played 25 games of this in the first 2 days that we picked it up. We just kept coming back to it. The games are so quick quick to play, that it doesn't take very long to get through them. I set up to 20 minutes, but once we got going and we got better at it, we could finish a game in under 10. So it's a fast playing, super fun game. It doesn't fit very well on the shelf. If I had a knock against this one, it's that it doesn't fit very well on the shelf, and that it is, it's a handmade game, so it's not an inexpensive one, and you're sort of limited in where you can find this one. But we really, really enjoyed Biñho, and I look forward to playing it again. I'm just flicking this ball around, and I feel like I want to call my son out. He's studying right now in his room. I want to call him out. We could play another game. He's a little reluctant to play it against me because he hasn't won a game yet. And that is Biñho and Crokinole in a nutshell. If you have any questions about either of these dexterity games, you can leave them in the comment section below the video, or you can email me at brian@brainsongames.ca. Brainsongames.ca is the website. That's where future episodes will go, and the previous ones are up there already. Brains on Games is the Twitter handle and the Facebook page and the Instagram feed, so we're all over the place. And if you enjoyed this video and you want to be notified of future ones, you can head on over to YouTube and click that subscribe button. Thanks for joining me, and hopefully I'll see you next time.